The apartment was smaller than he expected, but it was cheap, and that mattered more. It stood on the outskirts of the city, a building so old it seemed to sigh beneath its own weight. The previous tenant had left in a hurry, abandoning furniture, clothes, even half-eaten meals still rotting on the counter. Something about that unsettled him, but he pushed it aside. The landlord had barely spoken during the lease signing, just handed him the keys with a look that lingered a second too long. That night, as he settled into his new home, he heard it for the first time. The soft crackle of static, distant yet constant, as if a radio had been left on somewhere within the walls. At first, he assumed it was his neighbors. The walls were thin, sound carried easily. But as he pressed his ear to the drywall, he realized the noise wasn't coming from next door. It was inside his apartment, inside the walls themselves. The sound grew stronger when he neared the attic hatch, a small, warped panel in the ceiling he hadn't even noticed before. A chill crawled up his spine, but curiosity outweighed his unease. He found a ladder, climbed up, and pushed the hatch open. The air inside was stale, thick with dust, and something else, something metallic like old wires left to rot. And there, half buried beneath yellow newspapers and forgotten boxes, was the radio. It was old, the kind with a wooden frame and heavy dials, its speakers covered in faded fabric. He reached for it, and as his fingers brushed the surface, the static flared, a sudden burst of white noise that sent a shudder through him. The radio wasn't plugged in. There were no wires, no batteries. And yet, as he stared at it, the static shifted, shaping itself into something almost human, soft, fragmented whispers threading through the noise. He told himself it was just interference, a stray signal from a distant station. But even as he carried it downstairs, he couldn't shake the feeling that the whispers were speaking to him. That night, sleep came fitfully. The static filled the silence, even when he unplugged the radio and placed it in the closet. It was a restless hum, a presence that felt too close, too knowing. He awoke in the dark, heart pounding, sweat slicking his skin. The whispering had grown louder. He turned on the light, expecting to see the radio still tucked away where he left it. But it wasn't. It sat on the floor by his bed, speaker turned toward him as if listening. His breath hitched. He hadn't moved it. He knew that. He threw a blanket over it, shoved it back into the closet, and locked the door. But the whispers continued, threading through the wood, curling into his ears like a voice murmuring secrets meant only for him. The following days blurred together. The whispers became clearer, no longer hidden beneath the static. They spoke in a language he didn't understand, syllables rolling in patterns too deliberate to be chance. At work, exhaustion clung to him. His coworkers' voices felt distant, stretched thin like radio signals caught between stations. The world outside the apartment felt muted, unreal, as if he existed somewhere between waking and dreaming. He tried to throw the radio away, carrying it down to the dumpster and hurling it inside. But when he returned home, it was waiting for him, sitting on his kitchen table, speaker crackling softly. Fear settled into his bones. He considered leaving, breaking the lease, disappearing into another city. But something held him there, something deeper than logic. The whispers were changing, shaping themselves into something closer to words. His name, his past. Things he had never spoken aloud, things no one else could know. At night, the voice became clearer, more familiar. It spoke to him the way a friend would, weaving memories into its static breath. He found himself listening, sitting in the dark with the radio humming in his lap, his fingers tracing the grooves of its wooden frame. He whispered back, unsure why, and the voice, whatever it was, laughed. Then came the dreams, flickering images, disjointed and sickly. A man standing in a darkened room, his back turned, his posture unnatural, stiff as a marionette. A door that shouldn't exist, its frame warped, leading into nothingness. Hands pressing against the walls, stretching the plaster like fabric, pushing through, reaching. He would wake with the whispers still in his ears, the radio humming, always humming. And one night, as he lay in the silence, the voice finally spoke in a language he understood. "Let me in," it said. The next morning, he found his reflection wrong, a fraction of a second too slow, its movements lagging behind his own. His face was pale, sunken, as if the nights had stolen something vital from him. He stopped answering his phone, stopped leaving the apartment. The world outside felt distant now, unreachable, as if he were tuning out of reality itself. He tried to smash the radio, shattering the wooden casing, tearing out wires that should not have worked. But when he looked away, even for a second, it was whole again, waiting. The whispers grew relentless. They no longer paused, no longer faded with the sunrise. They were with him always, woven into the air, threading through his thoughts like parasites burrowing deep. He couldn't remember the last time he had eaten, the last time he had truly slept. He sat in front of the radio for hours, knees drawn to his chest, breath shallow. The voice no longer asked for permission. It was inside him now, that whispering his thoughts before he could think them, finishing his sentences in his own voice. One night, the door opened. He hadn't moved, hadn't stood. But there it was, yawning wide, revealing the hallway beyond. And standing there, half shrouded in shadow, was himself. His own face, staring back, hollow-eyed and waiting. The radio crackled, the whispers surged, and his reflection stepped forward. The lights flickered. The apartment stretched, warped, reality twisting like a radio dial spinning wildly through stations. He tried to scream, but his voice had been stolen, buried beneath the static. The last thing he saw before the darkness swallowed him whole was his reflection. No, not his reflection. The thing that had worn his face, smiling, reaching, stepping into his world as he was pulled into the other. Morning came. The apartment was quiet. The radio sat untouched on the table, its wooden frame pristine, and when the landlord knocked, checking on the new tenant who hadn't been seen in days, a familiar voice answered. The door opened. The man inside smiled, his eyes dark, his posture just slightly wrong. "I'm fine," he said, stepping aside. The landlord hesitated, then nodded, turning away. As he left, the apartment door slowly, softly clicked shut, and from inside, beneath the faint hum of the radio, something whispered, waiting for the next one. The first time she noticed it, she thought she was imagining things. It was subtle, a fraction of a second, a hesitation in the mirror that didn't match her own. She had been brushing her teeth, leaning in close, her reflection moving as it always had. But then she blinked, and for the briefest moment, she swore the reflection blinked after her, not with her. A trick of the light, she told herself. Fatigue. Nothing more. But as she turned away, a sliver of unease curled in her stomach, a whisper of something wrong, something watching. The days passed, and the feeling grew stronger. The mirror in her bathroom, the glass of shop windows, even the darkened surface of her phone screen, all of them held something that wasn't quite right. The movements were always just slightly delayed, almost imperceptible, but enough to make her heart stutter in her chest. And then came the changes, small at first, a tilt of the head when hers remained still, a flicker of movement in the corner of her eye when she wasn't looking, but soon the differences became undeniable. She woke one morning to find her reflection already staring at her, waiting. She tested it, moved her hands in slow, deliberate gestures, watching the glass with a pounding heart. Most times the reflection followed, but sometimes it didn't. Sometimes it did something else entirely. A twitch of the lips, a shift in the eyes, a slow, creeping smile that never touched her own face. Panic clawed at her ribs. She covered the mirrors, avoided looking at her reflection in passing. But no matter how hard she tried, she could still feel it, feel her, watching from beneath the glass. Then came the voice, soft at first, a whisper threading through the silence when she was alone. It wasn't outside of her, it was inside. Inside the mirror, inside her thoughts, a presence that did not belong. It spoke her name, curling around it like a lover, like a predator. "Let me in," it said, over and over, "let me in." She refused, gritted her teeth, pressed her hands to her ears, but the voice only grew stronger, more insistent. It knew her fears, her secrets, the thoughts she never dared to say aloud. The reflection changed. It was no longer bound by her movements, no longer mimicking her perfectly. It had become something else, something separate. She would wake in the night and find it standing in the mirror, watching, smiling. The first time she saw it move when she was perfectly still, her scream lodged in her throat, frozen by the sheer primal wrongness of it. It raised a hand, pressed it to the glass, fingers splayed wide, and for the first time she saw its lips move. "Soon," it whispered, breath fogging against the inside of the glass. She tried to fight it. She smashed the mirrors, shattered the glass. But every time, When she looked again, they were whole, pristine, waiting. It was patient. It never rushed. It wanted her to break, to shatter before the final moment, and she could feel it happening. The reflection was stronger now. She would catch herself hesitating, forgetting which side of the glass she was on. Her hands trembled when she reached for her own face, unsure if it was hers at all. And then, one night, she woke to find the reflection gone. The mirror was empty. The room behind it was her own, but she was not in it. And then behind her, the floor creaked. Her breath hitched. She turned, slow, agonizingly slow, and saw what she had feared most, the reflection. Not in the mirror, but here, in the room with her. It smiled, its teeth too sharp, its eyes dark and endless. You took too long, it said. She tried to run, but it was faster. It was her, after all. It caught her wrist, yanked her forward, and before she could scream, before she could fight, the world flipped. She stumbled, dizzy, disoriented, and when she looked up, she saw herself, standing where she had been, looking at her through the mirror. Only now she was on the wrong side. She slammed her hands against the glass. It didn't yield. The thing wearing her face leaned in close, placed a hand where hers met the surface. "Thank you," it whispered. Then it turned away, walked out of the room, left her behind. She screamed. She pounded against the mirror until her fists bled. But no one could hear her. No one could see. And in the real world, her stolen body, her stolen self moved on, lived, while she remained trapped behind the glass, forever watching.